them at the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and anybody that's got two fists and a good heartbeat's got a chance. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release, but challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. And this week, we are talking the 1990 film Rocky V. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the Red Stallion, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. It's been some time since I've sat down and revisited Rocky V, so I'm pretty interested to see what it's like.
It's been some time. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've watched it too. What is your history with, I guess, the franchise as a whole? It's hard to talk about only Rocky V, but what's your history with this franchise or this movie specifically? I assume this isn't one you caught in theaters.
No, given that this came out in 1990 and I was 3. So I can't say that my dad was lining up his 3-year-old to go watch Rocky V. But yeah, this was always the one my parents didn't watch. They would watch, like, if it were on TV, they would always skip this one. This was always the one where they were like, it's Rocky V. We're not going to watch that.
Yeah.
It's all, and that's kind of, I think, the general vibe of the film and just kind of cultural, in kind of pop culture is like, it's the skippable one. But that might be a mistake. It's not for me to judge. But yeah, so I've watched the Rocky movies off and on. Like, obviously growing up, just being alive, having cable, these movies showed up on TV endlessly. Yes. You know, things like, the Rocky theme, the fights with Apollo, Eye of the Tiger, Fighting Drago, like that stuff all gets just kind of ingrained into your brain, just like almost by diffusion. Like it's not even like deliberate. Like I'm sitting down and digesting the Rocky films. It's just like just bleeds in. Can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, Simpsons references, commercials,
right?
I mean,
like it's
the
just
brisk iced tea commercial. Yeah,
it's everywhere. I mean, got Ninja Turtles. There's Rocky jokes in the '89 Turtles movie that we've watched to death. I mean, it's
Andrew,
just
there is no
pop culture
89
mammoth.
Turtles movie. You're about to get fired from this show.
It was it filmed in '89? Chris, help me out here. Do something. I don't know what it is. Maybe I took too many hits. But it's getting rough, folks. But no, either way, like this is a pop culture giant. Everybody knows who Rocky Balboa is. Even if you've not watched the films, you know who Rocky Balboa is. You know who Sylvester Stallone is. So I've always watched them on and off. I actually had to dig out my Blu-rays to watch this because these don't stream anywhere. And I hadn't even unpacked my Blu-rays yet since I moved. So I had to go digging for it. And I was like, God, I hope I kept those. And I did. So
do you also have the heavyweight collection of all 6 movies? Is that the set that you have?
I have the Undisputed collection.
Oh, that is a bit different than the one I have. Mine came in like little postcards for each movie.
Well, mine is therefore better because mine's the Undisputed collection, not the heavyweight.
I mean,
collection.
There's no arguing with that. It's undisputed.
There isn't. That's math, or grammar, whichever it is. But yeah, I remember when Rocky Balboa came out like a little bit later, and I remember watching that one. I think I might have seen that one in theaters, and obviously Creed more recently. But yeah, I mean, I've always liked the movies, off and on. Not quite nearly as passionate as I think somebody else in this conversation feels about them. But I've always been a fan. Rocky V can't, like I said, never been something that I've revisited very much. I don't know if that's just letting the opinions of others sway my decision making, but it's just not something I've gone back to very much. So I was excited to kind of go back and see, especially after your glowing review last night, where you were like, there are no bad Rocky movies.
I did text you that. Normally, I mean, we don't talk about these movies before the podcast. Save it for the mic. But
right.
I feel very confident in that statement. There are no bad Rocky movies. But I think you really hit the nail on the head saying, like, this movie's legacy, Rocky V, it's the, quote, bad one. It's the bad Rocky movie. It's the one that you skip. It's the one that you try to forget about, erase your memory. I mean, that is, like you said, growing up, I didn't specifically sit down and watch these Rocky movies. I probably saw Rocky 4 at some point because that is everywhere growing up. So that's probably the only one as a child that I watched. or saw enough of to say that I saw the movie. And my parents aren't big fans of the franchise, to my knowledge. Like, but I just knew Rocky 5 is the bad one. You just know it's just ingrained in pop culture. And so, sometime before the release of Creed, I got this heavyweight collection, and I watched all the movies and absolutely fell in love with the franchise and the character of Rocky Balboa. So, full disclosure, Rocky Balboa is my favorite film character of all time. I love this character. I love the performance. It blows me away. Every single movie he appears in, all across Rocky and the Creed movies. So I got caught up on it, and I was really blown away at the time because knowing the franchise as Rocky 4, as a Sylvester Stallone vehicle, I expected 6 movies of super cheesy boxing montages, right? That is all I expected, and I was totally fine with that. And, 4 does deliver that, but you watch that first Rocky movie, and it's like a romance, it's a character study, it's a drama that happens to have boxing. Like, it is incredible. It blows me away. And then I'm like, okay, well, it starts off with like one great movie and then gets super cheesy, but 2 is like the same tone as number 1. And it's a very moving character study. The cheese starts to seep in with number 3. Running on the beach in slow motion. And then, of course, really explodes in 4. And then they kind of try to bring it back a little bit with 5. But I fell in love with this whole franchise. One of my favorites. I love this character. And I understand to a point why people say what they do about 5. But I think this movie is absolutely perfect for our show, for our premise.
Yes.
We're going to have a positive conversation about this movie. We're going to talk about what works in this movie because, as we've established already, nobody else really does that. Everybody, their one line about Rocky 5 is, it sucks. It's the worst one. Skip it. And that's the end of the conversation. No one's really diving into this movie when they talk about Rocky. So we are going to do exactly that. During the month of June, we are covering Black Sheep movies, the quote-unquote low point of franchises. This week, of course, Rocky 5, the movie that was released November 16th of 1990, made on a budget of $42 million. At the box office, it brings in $120 million. Now, that is making a profit, technically, but it is the lowest box office total for any movie in this franchise. Critically, it is not well received at all. Absolutely panned. Holds just a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I don't normally do this, but I wrote down the byline, like the quick tag they put on Rotten Tomatoes, because this seems especially harsh. Here's what Rotten Tomatoes, how it sums up its reviews. It says, Rocky V's attempts to recapture the original's working class grit are as transparently phony as each of the thuddingly obvious plot developments in a misguided installment that sent the franchise flailing into long-term limbo.
Jesus.
They were out for blood with that, right?
Brutal. My God. My God, that's brutal. And it's so weird. That's such a weird thing. I don't mean to cut you off, but the thing that I think is interesting is the obvious plot developments part, where it's if you're really going to harsh this for quote unquote obvious plot developments, after he loses, immediately after he loses to Mr. T in Rocky 3 that he's going to come back and beat him later. Would you call it an obvious plot development?
Yeah, after 4 movies of him being an underdog that wins in the end.
And always winning in the end, you're going to now say, oh, it's obvious plot developments. I'm like, yes, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's a logical progression of the story.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, that is this movie's legacy in pop culture, that it's bad. That's the only conversations that exist around it.
Bad.
We're changing that today. This movie was written by Sylvester Stallone. Of course, he wrote all of the Rocky movies. Very talented man. Writes a lot of his movies, some of his most famous movies. Also wrote all of the Rambo movies, writing First Blood way back in 1982, which is probably his most famous writing credit outside of this franchise. But Stallone He can do it all. I mean, I
Yeah.
won't. If you want to hear my like 10-minute rant on why I love Sylvester Stallone, go listen to our Judge Dredd episode. I kind of went off the rails there with how much I love this guy, but just insanely
He went way off
talented.
the rails. Way off the rails, folks.
Insanely talented. And Andrew, at the very least, you got to agree with me here. Underrated as a screenwriter.
Yeah, and people. It's interesting because, like, I think there are things that, like the Rambo series. You're not going to see anybody talk about the Rambo series nearly as glowingly as they talk about the Rocky series. And I think, and I don't think anybody, even the most generous of fans, would argue that those movies are like hidden gems. But I think specifically when it comes to like Rocky Balboa, that character, there's an ownership. There's a sense of personal investment that never goes away, even in the Creed movies, because the Creed movies are kind of written and directed by different people, but he still basically writes all of Rocky's dialogue. Because he knows that character better than there's nobody who understands Rocky Balboa better than Stallone. And people don't realize that, like, writing Rocky is like one of the first things Stallone does in film. Like, literally, he like Citizen Kane's it right out the gate by writing one of the greatest sports screenplays of all time. And then obviously in the 80s when the cheese ramps up and he turns himself into a topographic map of the Rocky Mountains, things shift around a little bit. But yeah, there's some, even in this one, I think there's a lot of scenes that really hit, and we're going to talk about them. But I definitely agree that there's if it's interesting because, like, if you announced there were certain things Stallone was writing, I would probably question it. But there's other things where I'm like, yeah, I bet he'd probably nail that. Like, there was one point where he was talking about writing and starring in an Edgar Allan Poe movie, and I thought that was so strange because I can't see Stallone as Edgar Allan Poe in my head. But, like, Rocky.
I want to see it though.
I'm kind of like, I just want to see Stallone like up against a window with the rain on it, talking about birds. But yeah, he's definitely got some underrated chops there. I think people kind of they box Stallone in, and I really don't think they should.
Hey,
see what I did there?
I see what you did there. The movie is not directed by Sylvester Stallone, who wrote entries 2 through 4 of this franchise. Instead, he brings back the director of the original movie, John G. Avildsen. First off, R.I.P. Mr. Avildsen passed away in 2017. But the Rocky movie, the first one, was really a big break for him as well as Stallone. He had directed some movies before then, but definitely this took him to new heights and went on to have a very fruitful career. Directed the first 3 Karate Kid movies and the film 8 Seconds, that bull riding movie from the 90s. So steady work throughout his life. Well-regarded director. I thought it was pretty cool of Sylvester Stallone to bring him back, because he certainly didn't have to do that. Stallone had directed plenty of these movies by that point, but it kind of seemed like a nice way to sort of respect him and pay him back and bring the series full circle.
I think the story of the film definitely was a big part of that too. Also, Avildsen was born in Oak Park, Illinois, where I used to live. Also, where Betty White is from.
Hey, that's fun.
I think the story of this film kind of taken Rocky back to the streets, if you will. I think there was definitely an idea that bringing back John was a good idea to kind of get back into that mindset. Because he did so. I mean, he won the Academy Award for Best Director. He won the Academy Award, right?
I know he was nominated. Did he win it?
Yeah, Best Director. So cool.
There it is.
So
you're safe.
I'm safe. But
I'm gonna leave all this in.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Everyone can see me in real time. But I think it was a good choice to bring back here. Obviously, he was really good at the dramatic, emotional moments of the first Rocky, because there's a lot of Rocky. It's definitely a boxing movie, or it's a movie about boxing, but there's a lot of human drama in there. There's a lot of human emotion in there, and I think he was really good at cueing in on that. And you kind of see that a little bit more in some of those early Karate Kid films, too, with some of the stuff with Mr. Miyagi. But he's definitely good at the quieter, dramatic stuff, and I think it definitely lined up to bring him back for this. And yeah, I'm sure Stallone could have directed this himself if he really wanted to, but it was cool to see him bring him back.
I agree. And let's jump into it. All of the best parts of Rocky V. After his fight with Drago, Rocky Balboa learns he has severe brain damage from his years in the ring and must retire. To make matters worse, his accountant has scammed the family out of all of their money. Forced to give up his career and luxury home, Rocky moves back to Philadelphia with his wife Adrian, brother-in-law Paulie, and son Robert. While working at his old gym, Rocky is approached by Tommy Gunn, an up-and-coming boxing prodigy who wants to be trained by Rocky. After agreeing to do so, Rocky finds a new purpose as Tommy's manager, but the time away from his son is taking a toll. When Tommy leaves Rocky for the fast-talking George Washington Duke, who promises him greater fortune, Rocky realizes his family was more deserving of his time all along. But Tommy and Duke return to try and provoke Rocky into one last fight. I think he's got one more in him, Andrew.
One more round, you might say?
Hey. We should say this movie was intended to be the end of the Rocky franchise. That's how it was promoted. That was no secret. You can tell the way the ending credits of this movie have like a montage for all the movies. And I think that feeds into a lot of like the reception it had at the time, kind of looking at it in that framing. And I think it has only aged better with time. But before we jump into why that is, of course, we got to talk about the cast of this film, starting with a high point, the best casting, best performance of the movie. Every week, we recognize one person who has gone above and beyond the call of duty and elevated the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, go ahead and kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Rocky V?
As we've established, I think there's definitely a few under the radar performances in this film. And while that may seem obvious, and while I do believe somebody else in this conversation will line it up the potentially more obvious way, I'm going to go a bit different, and I'm going to give it to Talia Shire as Adrian Balboa. I think she's got a real emotional core of this film, especially early on when like Rocky is being told you can't fight again, and they're in these dire financial straits, and Rocky's like, oh, well, I'll just fight again. What's the problem? There's this desperation in her performance. She's like, it's not just about the money for her. She like genuinely is like, Rocky, if you fight again, you're going to die. I can't handle that. Can't do that.
Yep.
And it recurs throughout the whole film. There's this protective nature that she has over Rocky that kind of forms this emotional thread through the film, especially as Rocky kind of gets detached and starts kind of living vicariously through Tommy Gunn. But yeah, I think a lot of focus very rightfully goes on to Stallone's performance as Balboa through these films, but I think she does a particularly great job here, obviously throughout the whole series, and this would mark her last appearance as the character as well, at least as far as new footage goes. But yeah, I'm gonna go that way. Talia Shire, Adrian.
Andrew, that's a great pick. I mean, watching this movie, all I kept thinking about during her scenes was how far that character has come, and you've got to give it up to her for that change. Because that first movie, her whole character is that she's super reserved. She's in a bad, abusive relationship with her brother as her only family member, and Rocky kind of breaks her out of that and shows that she's worthy of love and worthy of being loved. And it's a great story, but her character there is just super quiet, super shy, super reserved, doesn't speak up. And you jump 5 movies later, and she is telling Rocky, no, you're not going to fight. And she's constantly reminding him of what should be important, what truly matters. She gets what I'm going to call a Yoda moment, where she just lays out the themes of this film in black and white in her dialogue. And it's a fantastic performance. How far Talia was able to bring this character over the course of these movies is fantastic. Super worthy award. I'm glad you're giving it to her. It's not who gets my Mark Strong Award, which is why that I'm glad you're recognizing her. But you know who I'm getting my Mark Strong Award to? Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa. I mean, he's my favorite film character of all time. Of course he's getting it. But I'm not giving him the award because he's my favorite. He's my favorite because he's worthy of this award, in my opinion, across every single Rocky movie. You've got 6 Rocky movies. That's 6 Mark Strong Awards as far as I'm concerned. Just like I said about Tom Cruise last week on Mission Impossible. But he makes these movies. He's the heart and soul. This character is extremely special. And the performance, I think, is deceptively good. I mean, it's been praised. I'm not saying like it's underrated or anything, but he becomes this character with every fiber of his being, every mannerism, and the way that he talks, where the mumbling, rambling talks with these jokes thrown in, and he kind of comes across as a dope, but he is smart, he is witty, and he does know this one thing extremely well, but he makes mistakes, and there's no one could play this character other than Sylvester Stallone. I mean, he just becomes another person. He just becomes Rocky Balboa. Works for me every single time. A lot of my notes were literally just like writing down lines that Rocky said. 'Cause I love the delivery, or I love the joke. I love this character so much. So yeah, it's the obvious pick, at least especially coming from me. But Sylvester Stallone, officially a 2-time Mark Strong Award winner.
Can't go wrong, man. It's a great performance, and I think that definitely gets lost here because I can see how after Rocky IV you would be kind of confused on where to go, because at that point, you know, Rocky defeated communism, so there's
he ended the Cold War in the ring.
He ended the Cold War in the ring with his bare hand, well, his gloved hands. But it's so I could see kind of looking at I can see both sides of one. Not necessarily seeing that as like a fitting end to the character. Like, well, great, it's this great bombastic finish, but like we're kind of losing sight of Rocky the person at this point. Like Rocky IV is a lot more about like kind of what it all means on a bigger scale, and you kind of can lose sight of what Rocky as a person is, especially where he started from. And so I can see definitely the allure of being like, well, let's strip it all back. Let's get rid of all of it, and let's get back to Rocky as a person. Let's get back to Rocky's family. Let's get back to, rather than kind of having the family be a conduit for the story, let's take it back and have the story be about his family and what Rocky does when he's kind of forced back to where he was at the beginning. And so there is a lot of nuance that goes into that. But like you said, this is a whole performance. This is genuinely like, and they go to great lengths to kind of really cut back and not make, because like by Rocky IV, Rocky looks insane. Like he is jacked to the
cut
gills.
from marble. Yeah,
he's
ridiculous.
Muscles on top of muscles on top of muscles. Like the dude looks at me and I'm like, dude, are you gonna have a heart attack? Like Jesus. But so by this one, they kind of strip it all back. You don't see him kind of. There's no classic boxing moments. So they kind of really go back, because if you look at him in Rocky 1 versus Rocky 4, even that is just a complete transformation. He looks like a normally built dude in Rocky. He looks fairly normal. I say normal, but like, you know, I look at Rocky and I'm like, yes, that's a human. By Rocky 4, I'm like, that's not a human. That's a robot. But so in this one, I've mentioned it before, how in Copland they make Stallone look really dumpy. They just like really kind of like trash him up for that movie. So for this one, they don't quite go that far, but they definitely make that effort to like,
they put him in a sweater.
Back. Let's
hide all those
sweater.
muscles.
They put him in baggy clothes. And they really try to like take him back. So he's speaking, because like even by Rocky IV, he's like not even talking like he does in Rocky anymore, really. So this is really kind of not just let's visually take it back, let's just thematically take it back, let's physically take it back as well. So Rocky ends up being a lot more like he was in that first film. And yeah, I can see the allure in going there, and Stallone dedicates to it. It's no easy task, and he's up to it.
Burt Young, of course, returns as the character Paulie, and Burt Young, journeyman actor, appeared in tons and tons of movies, but undoubtedly most famous for this character of Paulie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he's the character that you love to hate. He's extremely frustrating. A much more subtle arc over the movies, I think, than Rocky and, of course, Adrian. But it's definitely, you know, that first movie, you probably just straight up don't like him. I say love to hate, but he's pretty awful to his sister and
he's
to
a jerk.
Rocky. He's an alcoholic. He's a jerk. And the subtle change, I think, is that he's still an alcoholic. He's still crass, but he obviously loves his family at this point. He's the one that's responsible for getting scammed, for losing their money, and he beats himself up over it. You can tell how bad he feels about it. And I think that's what's driving his alcoholism at this point. I mean, he's not going to recover from that. It's part of the character. but he's learned sort of where to direct his anger, I guess, or not to direct it to the people that he loves. Like I said, it's a subtle change, but there's no point in this movie where you're going to point to and be like, man, he's such a jerk for doing that. It's a lot more sympathetic by this point.
Yeah, by this point, he's, because he's been along with Rocky and Adrian on this whole journey from, the beginning to now. And, even the scenes where they find out they've lost everything because their accountant ran off with their money. He feels like he's defensive because he's like, don't put this all on me. But at the same time, like, he knows what he's done. He knows this is on him. And he's trying to do everything he can to kind of still try to get by. Still a little bit of a, trying to sell like Rocky's coffee cup and stuff, just trying to make some extra money, things like that. Just trying to do what he can for all of that. But yeah, he's a lot more sympathetic a character at this point. Obviously, he does get to come back around for Rocky Balboa. We have not yet seen him in the Creed films. Don't really think that's the point of those.
He passed away.
But
he visits his grave in the first Creed.
That's
the
right.
character passed away, not
the character
not
passed
Burt
away.
Young.
I was like, Burt Young's still alive.
No, he's still alive.
That's right. I haven't watched again. Apparently, I need to rewatch Creed too. But yeah. It's like I said, a lot more sympathetic by this point. It's been 5 films. He's really just kind of the rough-edged uncle with a heart of gold at this point.
Sage Stallone plays Rocky Balboa's son, Rocky Jr., or Robert, as he's called through most of the movie. Obviously, this is Sylvester Stallone's real-life son. First off, gotta say, rest in peace, Sage Stallone tragically passed away in 2012. Only 36 years old. Passed away due to a coronary artery disease. It's kind of a freak thing, this condition that he had.
Go to the doctor, folks.
Yeah, get checked up. The routine stuff becomes not routine stuff when you don't do it. Yeah, it's scary stuff. So pretty tragic end. And throughout his life, did a lot of work in film, seemed to be following in his father's footsteps to a certain degree, responsible for actually preserving a lot of grindhouse films and B-movies that would otherwise have been lost at time. So pretty cool work in that regard. A few acting roles, but definitely his role here as Robert is his most high-profile performance. And it's really good. I mean, kid actors, we typically kind of judge them like on a different scale. A lot of times you're like, oh, they're pretty good for a kid, because we know how bad it can be whenever it's like a stiff child actor. But I think his role is believable. There's very sweet moments between him and his father, and then of course he gets very angry and resentful, plays it all very well. A great performance from Sage.
I agree. I think he gets to really he gets a pretty good B plot in this film, if you will. It ends up kind of the A plot at the end of the day. But basically, he's coping with this change in his life. He's at a school where kids are making fun of him because his family has lost everything. They're calling his dad's retired. They're calling him, because his dad a punk at one point. So he's having trouble with that. And he's kind of looking to his dad for guidance, and his dad loses sight of that. And it ends up taking a toll. So he ends up working with Paulie to kind of help get better at defending himself. And then ultimately they have a reconciliation towards the end when Rocky realizes that his mind has been in the wrong place. But it is, it's a pretty nuanced performance, especially for a child actor. It's very easy for, child actors in general kind of get pretty collectively crapped on. But I think he's doing a great job here.
Tommy Morrison plays Tommy Gunn. Sadly, this is another time I have to say, rest in peace. Passed away in 2013, also very young, just 44 years old. Tommy Morrison was a boxer in real life, a very promising one, but did have to retire early in the 90s after being diagnosed with HIV, who he admittedly says he lived a very fast and rough life, and kind of pointed to that as the reason for the circumstances that he found himself in, eventually passing away due to AIDS. So, also, way too young, way too soon, very sad. That being said, just like I was just saying how, kid actors kind of get judged on a different scale, this is an athlete coming into a role to do some acting. And even though he's a real-life boxer playing a boxer, most of his screen time isn't in the ring. It is having conversations with Rocky and doing real emotional stuff. And it's about his decisions on how he wants his career to go, and who's going to be his manager, and a lot of dialogue, a lot of heavy lifting. I think for the most part, he's up to the challenge. If you didn't tell me this was an athlete playing this role, I wouldn't be suspicious of it. Knowing that he's a boxer, you might point to a few scenes and be like, okay, that might be a little bit rough there. But I think by and large, he's doing a pretty dang good job.
I agree. His actual boxing record is actually pretty impressive. He had 52 fights and he only lost 3 of them. That is... I did not expect those numbers. Typically when you've got boxers, and this guy had 2 different reigns as heavyweight champion. He had a reign as WBO and the IBC heavyweight champion. Not particularly long in either case, only retained the WBO title once and made no successful defenses of the IBC title. But I just thought that was interesting that, like, also, it's not just as he brought in to do this. I know Sylvester Stallone and Burt Young did accompany him on one of his fights, I think for purposes of filming the movie. But yeah, like I said, I watching this the first time, I would have never known he was a boxer, and I'm sure I never looked at him and was like, this is the fault with the film. Like I never thought that. Like he's up to the task of what he's doing here. It is a lot of kind of very, simple response dialogue, but he's still putting his all into it. Obviously, it's not hard to kind of follow the story that his character takes in this. He's, a scrappy up-and-comer who wants Rocky's guidance and ends up falling in with the wrong crowd. And has to be put in his place, folks. And when Rocky has to put you in your place, you're not going to like it. But yeah, it's a good performance. Like I said, not a whole lot of fat that he gets to chew there, but he's up to the task of he does exactly what is being asked of him.
Burgess Meredith reprises his role in some key flashback scenes. His character of Mickey had passed away by this point. And I've once again got to say, R.I.P. Burgess Meredith, passing away in 1997. A little bit less tragic than the other deaths we've been talking about. He was 89 years old and essentially died of old age. So, long, happy life by all accounts. And man, talk about a long life. Born in 1907. This man's credits go back to 1935. He has certainly done it all. I would probably say his role as Mickey is his most known role, especially by today's standards, but plenty of other high-profile credits. Something looking through there that I know him from is actually his last film role in Grumpier Old Men, a movie that I saw a ton of times growing up. I didn't even know it was a sequel for the longest time. I didn't see Grumpy Old Men until years later, but he's in Grumpier Old Men. He has one of my favorite lines in the movie. There's something that lives in my head rent-free. It's during a scene where a young child swallows a quarter and the parents are freaking out, and he gives them some comforting words.
Ellie, honey, did you swallow a quarter?
I'll call the doctor.
Relax. Kids swallow quarters all the time.
Really?
Sure. If she craps out 2 dimes and a nickel, then you can start worrying, huh?
Tremendous.
Burgess Meredith, I did not know that was Burgess Meredith. I did not know that was Rocky's trainer until literally like doing my notes for this. Like those are 2 separate people in my head, so it kind of blew my mind a little bit to put those 2 together.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I mean, I obviously Henry Bemis in The Twilight Zone, Time Enough at Last. Now I have time to read all my books, and his glasses break. Just a classic.
Oh,
probably one of my favorite.
I did not know that was him either.
Zone.
Look at that.
I can't believe you're ignoring that he was the Penguin for years. You haven't even mentioned it. He was the West Penguin.
These are like, there's like 5 separate people in my head that I just never connected the dots
that you haven't realized
You're
are all Burgess Meredith.
I mean, yeah, Burgess Meredith, I did know that. I did know that in my head. It's one of the things I knew, but didn't know that I knew, if that makes any sense. But
no, so he was the Penguin. He was on Twilight Zone. He was in, like I said, the Grumpier Old Men. And that's like, Grumpier Old Men is like 2 years before he dies. Like so he literally works from 1935 until like 1995. That is literally a 60-year career. And that is crazy to think about. And there's tons of great stuff in there. I mean, like I said, not even looking at so you take Rocky, and Rocky is like a decade after Batman. and Batman is 7 years after the Twilight Zone. Like, this is like, so he's got this, like I said, it's just endless and it goes forever. And he's a fantastic actor. And I'm really glad that they actually found a way to incorporate him into this. And obviously, if this was intended to be the final Rocky film, it made sense that you were going to find something for him to do. And I know they used the archival footage in Rocky Balboa, which was good. But like in here, he actually gets to film some new stuff. Definitely looking a little more haggard than he may have in some of the earlier films. But he gets to bring in some interesting motivation. Obviously, he's Mickey. He's the motivation. He's the whole speech that he has with him early on, where he's flashing back in the gym, and that actually got to me just a little bit. I was surprised, but he's Burgess Meredith. I can't be shocked. Greatest actor of all time.
I mentioned that he's probably most known for Mickey, but that's probably an age thing. I bet there's people of a certain age that most know him as the Penguin, I mean, or
as the
one
Penguin.
of his other roles.
Yeah.
I mean, a 60-year career. There might not be just one thing that sticks out. It's probably going to depend on age. But speaking specifically to his role as Mickey, I mean, someone going back to that first Rocky now might be like, oh, this is like stereotypical, boxing coach, old grizzled veteran. But it feels that way now because it's been done so many times since then. Like this was the blueprint. This was the template. Yeah. This was, you'll go back to that first movie of, you're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder. That was new at the time. That voice. It was. And it makes it that much more impressive. Like crafting this character, and of course, credits to Stallone for writing it as well, but bringing it to life, awesome. Yeah, just no one did it better.
No, absolutely. It's definitely a situation where like there's so many parodies and versions of that character that have existed ever since. The idea of just the motivational coach. And yeah, you don't realize that that's kind of where a lot of that starts from. And like you said, even the Twilight Zone, he was in like 4 or 5 different episodes of the Twilight Zone. So like he's got a bunch of different iconic moments in the Twilight Zone that he's a part of. And just, he's fantastic. I really can't stress enough just how good Burgess Meredith is beyond Rocky. Like he's great in this. He gets some of the best. He gets some really great lines in this one, but like he really is just. I mean, like I said, a 60-year career, and the dude never phoned it in.
Lastly, we have Richard Gant playing George Washington Duke, the slick manager, the Don King-esque manager. You could say there might be a little bit of inspiration there. Constantly trying to goad Rocky Balboa into one last money fight. So, of course, he can make the money for promoting it. And this man plays this character perfectly to a T. He's got the rhythm down, the voice down, the talking like he's always on his last breath to get, the next match hyped up or whatever. It's perfect. And, all the fast dialogue and quick quotes and silly catchphrases and stuff. I mean, it absolutely nails it. Also a great career, very long career. I know him probably, other than this, the thing that I most associate him with is Jason Goes to Hell, which is the 9th Friday the 13th movie, where he plays spoilers for Jason Goes to Hell, but the spirit of Jason possesses different people in that movie, and he's the first person to get possessed by
like the coroner.
Jason.
Yeah.
By taking a bite out of his heart.
Folks, it's a weird movie. It's very weird.
I hope to cover it on this show one day very soon. That might be coming. That's not a tease. We don't know yet, but I would love to cover that movie. Yeah. But also plays that role very well. The dude just is not afraid to go for it, no matter what the role is asking for.
He is not. I also remember him just looking at his filmography. He was when Jeff Bridges' apartment gets robbed in The Big Lebowski. He's one of the cops that's sitting in his apartment, just all annoyed. He's like, "We'll see about the credence." Literally in that movie for maybe 30 seconds. Like that's it. So it's so weird to kind of look at the genuine length of his career. But there's plenty of like recurring television on here. He was on Deadwood for a long time. He was on Men of a Certain Age. So he's been in and out doing his thing for a long time. But I do agree he is doing a great job here. Like I said, he's basically playing Don King. for lack of a better way to put it. That's
Yeah.
basically what he's doing. It's a very adjacent character. Obviously, he doesn't really care about Rocky. He doesn't care about his health. He just wants the money. And so he literally has his golden, his original golden boy is Union Kane, who he wants to take on Rocky and wants him to sign the fight. And he pushes Union Kane, also played by a boxer named Mike Williams, but he's in this, not a huge part of this film. But you know, the minute Union Kane loses to Tommy Gunn, he's all on Tommy Gunn's train now. He's like, that's it. Because the whole movie, his through line is he wants the Balboa fight. He wants to get Balboa out of retirement for his last big fight. And he really doesn't care who it's against. Union Kane is who he thinks is going to do that first. And the minute it switches to somebody else, boom, he's just right back to it. He's like, fine, if Union Kane will get me that fight, we'll have Tommy Gunn do it because he's the guy that you trained and he turned on you. So he's always closing. That's what he's always trying to do. And
Snake in the grass.
He is a pain in this whole movie. The whole movie, you're just like, I hate this guy. And thankfully, he gets a little bit of comeuppance at the end. But yeah, I can't. He plays this role to a T. Does exactly what needs to be done. And like I said, he gets that heat, brother.
Well, Andrew, it's about time we talk about the scenes of this movie. And of course, we're going to start with our favorite scenes, the best scenes of the film. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Rocky V?
It's a bit of a cheat here, but I'm actually going to go with the scenes where Rocky reconciles with his family. So this is kind of post Tommy Gunn kind of leaving him to kind of go with Duke permanently. Kind of just ices Rocky out at this point. And it's when Rocky really has that realization that he has been neglecting his family. Not just the neglect of his son is made a lot clearer, but they also dive into kind of he hasn't really been focusing on Adrian or what she's been going through either. So we get a really nice scene with Adrian in the street where he kind of realizes that he's lost sight of what's important, and then he has to kind of get back. And at this point, he has to go through a much more arduous process of trying to reconcile with his son, Robert, because his son at this point is over it. He's like, you've been gone, you've been distant. You say all these things, like, you know, there's a whole scene where he first like hangs out with Tommy Gunn, and he's like saying all the stuff to Tommy that he says to his son. And his son, you can just feel like the resentment from his son. Home team, the big
Home
thing.
team.
And then he says it to like Tommy Gunn, just like it's nothing. Just like it's nothing, Rocky. What
could you do
gives?
that, Rock?
How dare you? How could you do that? So Rocky gets his head straight. He figures out that his family is most important. And he, like I said, these are two they're back to back. They're all outside. So I think it's one scene. But I really do like these. Like I said, it cuts us back to that like, kind of dramatic undertone, like you said, of the first film, where it's a boxing movie, but like it kind of isn't. There's this drama to it. There's this emotion to it. There's even a romance to it. And with obviously Rocky and Adrian, you get that. And then the reconciliation with his son. I think that's just really good stuff. It shows the range of everybody involved. And it really kind of shows, especially Stallone's dedication to the Rocky character and just how much he can really make all that work. And so maybe a bit of an odd choice, but I think that kind of those two dramatic scenes back to back, I think that was really when it hit for me that, I'm not going to pretend, this movie is some underrated gem. Then again, it probably is. But it's but this was definitely a moment where I was like, people are overlooking aspects of this movie for sure, just if only for the dramatic performance that Stallone's able to give as Rocky.
Yeah, I agree. This is basically the same scene that I picked for favorite scene. It's funny, you said you're kind of cheating. You did the scene in the street with Rocky and Adrian, and then the scene right after that with Rocky and Robert, because I was prepared to be like, okay, follow me on this. It's kind of two scenes. But for me, it's the scene with Rocky and Robert in the house before that, and then the scene right after with Rocky and Adrian in the street. So it all kind of runs together, but I think we like these scenes for the same reason. I mean, it really encapsulates why this movie matters, why it's worth watching, why it is worthy to be in this franchise. It genuinely works. There's a genuinely great character drama happening here. So specifically in the scene in the house, it's Christmas Day. Robert's got some of his friends over. Some of them just aren't the best influence, and he's kind of just over the holiday spirit, too cool for Santa. And Rocky is trying his best to like make this feel special and sell the importance of Santa, which is just drunk Polly with in a Santa costume, and Rocky just oh my god, he's on the roof and the antlers and everything. Look at Santa, and like Polly comes down and it's just Robert's just like, Dad, this is so stupid. What is this? And he just goes downstairs to his room in the basement, and it's heartbreaking here. Like it genuinely hits because Rocky tries to like connect with Robert and realizes that he's really disconnected from his son. Like he didn't realize how bad it was. And he's trying to plead with Robert. He's like, this is what we do. This is what you like. You enjoy this. And Robert says, how do you know what I want? And then the delivery of the line that Sylvester gives here, he says, because I know you. And he's realizing like, I don't know you. Like his heart is breaking as he delivers that line. And it's so good. And immediately after that, Tommy Gunn shows up. He's telling him that he's leaving him for Duke, and that comes to a head. And he's out there, and he's pleading with Tommy, who's in like his brand new car, and he's telling him, "You don't want this. I know this game. I know what Duke's trying to do. He's trying to drive a wedge between us." He's literally pleading to him as he's driving away, like running alongside the car. And eventually, Tommy just takes off. And this is where we get Adrian running after him. And they have this big emotional scene in the streets. This is what I referred to as the Yoda moment earlier when we're talking about her performance. I say that as a reference to The Last Jedi, where Yoda shows up halfway through the movie and just tells you the theme of the movie, and it's really well done. He just tells you he says, the greatest teacher failure is. And that's all you need to know about
Frank
that movie.
Oz, you ain't.
Andrew, let's hear your Yoda delivery of the greatest teacher failure is. What do you got?
Why would I do that? I'm not Frank Oz.
The only failure is not trying, Andrew.
Don't you try your Frank Oz nonsense on me, Chris.
Anyway, back to Rocky 5. They are laying out the themes of this movie in black and white, and it friggin' works. Rocky is saying that he hates where their family is now. He's like, I know where we are. I don't want this. I don't want to be in the slums of Philadelphia. When I was training him, he says, when he's winning, I was winning. It was my last chance for respect for us. He thought that's what was important. And then Adrian comes in and says that he's not you. He doesn't have your heart. That's how you won those matches before, with your heart. And if there's something that you want to pass it on to your son because you're losing him. Boom. That's the movie. That's what we're having here. And it's delivered in great performances by Stallone and Talia. Just wonderful. Very good. I if there's any scene that's working, it is absolutely this one here. You buy that Stallone is way too caught up in training Tommy and caught up for the wrong reasons. You believe Talia Shire saying that you are misguided, you need to focus on your family. You believe that Robert is now a delinquent because he has a dangling earring. And man, in 1990, that meant you were bad.
Nothing says you're more delinquent than a dangling earring. I also like that. The group he's hanging out with is comprised of the girl who befriended him after he got beat up by the bullies, and then the bullies that beat him up, which he in turn beat up. So now they're all just friends. Like it's a very weird thing where like I didn't realize it was meant to be like the wrong group of people. I just thought that after you beat somebody up in this world, suddenly you're all right, we're fine. This is cool. We're good.
And to make matters worse, I think the girl that likes him was dating the bully at the beginning because he asked like, "Oh, what's her name?" He's like, "Oh, I dumped him." So I it's a weird,
It's a very
kids.
And you're all able to put your stuff aside and hang out together and have fun. All the more power to you. I gotta say,
maturity right there.
That's a shocking amount of maturity for teenagers. Having been one myself.
I love throughout the movie Sylvester Stallone, Rocky Balboa, and his son. That relationship works so well. Obviously, they're real life father and son. They're bringing a lot of like natural, real chemistry to the role. Mm-hmm. I think it was a bit smart to do that because since the son in the movie is playing such an important role, they did recast the son. They aged him up a little bit. If you go from Rocky 4 to this one, I think he had like a blonde-haired 9-year-old son in Rocky 4, and now it's Sage Stallone. But it's still the right move, in my opinion, because the payoff is so good. You believe when they are, really bonding in the beginning and, home team. I freaking love whenever before they lose all their money, they're in the big fancy house coming home from the fight with Rocky 4, and he's going through his son's drawings because he's a bit of an artist. And he holds up this picture that I respectfully am just going to describe as a big tit woman. Like she's topless and she's got comedically large bare breasts, and Rocky's like, whoa. And I love this dialogue because this kid says, yeah, that's my French teacher. And so Rocky takes a look at it and goes, oh, yeah, she looks French, sure. So good. But their chemistry throughout the movie, whether they're bonding or fighting or reconciling, it's the strongest relationship in this movie after, of course, Rocky and Adrian, which we've seen over the course of 5 movies.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sage was a great choice for this. A lot of really good scenes between them. Like I said, you buy the familial relationship. No notes. Again,
I love Rocky's dialogue. I love the delivery. I love all the little Rocky-isms and jokes peppered throughout, because sometimes it's him being witty. Sometimes it's him like being a bit of a dope or misunderstanding things. So there's a ton of notes I had to take about this, but I love at one point whenever Duke is trying to again get him to do one more fight, and he's talking to Rocky and Paulie on the street, and Rocky's trying to tell him, I'm officially expired, which is just a funny way to say retired. And then at one point, the Duke quotes Mark Twain about how money is the most important. And Paulie chimes in. He goes, "Who's Twain?" And Rocky explains, "Oh, he was a painter." And like, is that Rocky making a joke, or is that Rocky just not knowing things?
Not knowing who Mark Twain is.
I tend to think it's more the latter, but it's still very funny. Or at a point whenever he is training Tommy Gunn, and he's going through the streets of Philadelphia, just like he did back in the original Rocky movie, and he calls out to the priest from his apartment window to send down some blessings, is what he asks. And he says, 1, that I don't mess up being a manager, and B, that Tommy don't get hurt much. Switching from 1 to B, just pulling a buzz from Home Alone. It's so simple that, Andrew, it's funny.
It works. And those 2 movies were out in theaters at the same time.
Look at that. You gotta wonder who wrote
I know,
first.
because Rocky 5 came out, got beat at the box office in the opening weekend by Home Alone and Dancing with Wolves.
They came out at not only the same year, but like same time. They're both like holiday movies.
Yeah. Home Alone, I think, was a week or 2 before him.
They had the same joke.
Same joke.
That's interesting.
Did Sylvester Stallone ghostwrite Home Alone? Is this what we're learning here?
That's the takeaway here. Yeah.
So ridiculous. Can't believe they gave us our own show.
They being us. I can't believe we do this to people.
Can't believe we gave ourselves our own show. Look at us.
I do love. So there's this bully problem that Robert has at school. He gets beat up by a couple of bullies. They take his jacket, and Rocky doesn't really have the time to mentor him through this difficult situation because he's tied up with Tommy. And they do this really cool thing where they do the montage of him training Tommy, which is really good. Rocky montage, best in the game, right? But throughout this montage, you also unexplained, you see some shots of Robert like doing push-ups and working out, and he's with Paulie most of the time. Like, it's not his dad training him, but he's kind of doing it on his own. Wearing a Batman 89 shirt in one scene, I did notice, which of course was very hot at the time. And it seems a little odd. Like, well, why is Robert in this montage? And then it goes on to show Rocky and Tommy Gunn having their matches. And then we get a scene of the bullies picking on Robert again. But now, Andrew, he kind of beats the crap out of that bully. and earns his respect.
He straight up stomps him, man.
I love that line where he's like, let's end this right here. And the bull is like, yeah, that's cool with me, man. And they shake on it. And then, the beef is squashed.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, and now we're friends, apparently. That's how it works.
As we've said, Andrew, a lot of this stuff, it freaking works. And if you ask this guy, like I said, it's a worthy Rocky movie. You should watch it if you don't watch the whole franchise. It's an important part of the story. I'll say it's a good movie. I'm going to go ahead and say that. It's not without its faults, and this is a hashtag positivity podcast. We do only focus on the positives. We want to highlight all of that. I think we've highlighted a pretty good bit, but we can't talk about this movie without talking about the final fight. It's the final fight of a Rocky movie, Andrew. It's the pinnacle. It's the climax. It's what it's all been building to. But if there's any criticisms of this movie, this is where it happens. So a little bit of behind the scenes, what we do know is that originally in the script, Rocky Balboa dies at the end. He dies in the streets in Adrian's arms, which is a hell of a bummer. I get that Stallone was trying to end the series, and that can be an emotional, tragic ending, and maybe there's a way to make it work, but it's so against the hopeful optimism of the Rocky series that it's really hard for me to imagine a way that it worked. And a lot of people seem to agree at the time. Studio didn't like the ending, and even Stallone himself had second thoughts about it and rewrote the script while they were filming. In my opinion, that's why we get the ending that we get that feels so disconnected from the movie. He removed the death, but didn't really replace it with anything that fits the tone of the movie. It tells a great story with him and his son and him losing Tommy, but you have to resolve that conflict. And all we get is they do fight, but not in a boxing ring, which I think maybe could have been a solution to this. He trained Tommy, and maybe he knew his weaknesses and could have got the best of him. I don't know. But they have a street fight instead. And it's strange for a few reasons. For one, he gets provoked into this fight because Tommy Gunn hits Paulie. And so that's what makes him finally decide he's going to engage and actually fight Tommy Gunn in the streets. And they have this fight, and expectedly, eventually Tommy Gunn gets the best of him because he's younger, faster, stronger. Hits him real good. We get this really cool montage. It's really brutal. It's got scenes like Mickey and like all the movies and flashbacks to all the times he's been hit in the ring. I think it totally freaking works. And then what happens
really, really great
at the end of that montage, Andrew, is the music gets really happy and really triumphant. And then we get like an almost comical fight in the streets. I saw an article that Terry Funk of pro wrestling fame helped choreograph this. And you can tell because there's like drop toe holds and like leg chops.
Yeah,
and,
like he like sweeps the leg at one point, and you're like, what are you doing? Like it's such a strange it's like still it's like, dude, you're flipping around and doing stuff Rocky has never done ever, and you're doing it expertly. Like, what is going on?
It's not boxing at that point, it's a street fight. I do let's bring it back to the hashtag positivity podcast a little bit. I love this line from Robert, who is, the crowd has gathered to watch this fight, including his family. And he gets the upper hand on Tommy. He's knocking the crap out of him. And Robert goes, "Come on, knock the punk out. He took my room." That's what Robert's mad about. That he slept in his bed when he was staying with Rocky.
Hey, if you're a kid, maybe that is what you care about. I mean, he's already got his jacket back. What else has he got to be mad about?
So I'll say this about the final scene. It harshly changes in tone. And in a vacuum, in and of itself, it's kind of fun. It's a fun tone. He gets the best of Tommy, who's kind of been a jerk to him. Like you said, Duke finally gets his comeuppance because Rocky goes to face with him, and he has this great Duke line. He's like, "Touch me and I'll sue." And Rocky gives him punches the crap out of him, knocks him into a cop car. And I love this line. Rocky's like, "Sue me for what?" Because he's broke, and he's uses that as a joke. If you really dive into that line, Andrew, it's really important because it's showing that Rocky Balboa has come to terms with not having all of the money that he had, and he's okay living in Philadelphia with his family because he has what is truly important. That is the reason of that line, Andrew.
All right, I'm going to allow it.
That's look, hashtag PP. I think I've praised the movie enough that I can openly admit that there's a bit of a problem with this climax.
Yeah.
This
This is the other thing that I
how
see
it relates to the story.
This is the thing that I if somebody points to something in this movie that doesn't work, it's typically this. It's typically the final confrontation. I think even like moving it to like the gym or something in the ring would have had like a shockingly like different impact on the film. People would have seen it as being a little bit more of a Rocky ending versus the spinning drop toe hold. Which, you know, it's definitely a bit of a jarring situation. You get some good moments at the end, and obviously Rocky, like I said, that montage he gets where he comes back to life basically is pretty gnarly. So but yeah, like I said, hashtag PP, but I get it. I can understand people that might not be able to stick with it at that point. But at this point, you've watched the man defeat communism. I can handle a street fight for a few minutes.
Sure, why not?
Like the only other way to go for Rocky 5 would have just had to like fight an alien or something if you were going to keep like going up and up and up. Like he would have had to like go beyond the earth at that point to find something to fight. And folks, that's just ridiculous.
There is one last scene, a bit of an epilogue, where Rocky takes his son Robert to the famous steps from the first Rocky movie, and they go up, and it's a very nice, touching little scene. I like it for a lot of reasons. One, those steps lead to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which they never like expressly say in those movies. And if you're anything like me, you probably maybe didn't catch on to that. I always honestly assumed it was like a Capitol building or government building, but they directly acknowledge it here because they are actually going to go to the museum. And of course, his son Robert is shown to be into art, a bit of an artist himself throughout the movie. And I really do love this last line of the movie. Robert says, "You're going to love Picasso." And Rocky says, "Yeah, well, I love most everybody." That's the last thing Rocky says. And that's Rocky. That's perfect. That's just such a great character line and a good way to end the movie and at the time in the franchise. In closing, what I'm saying here is if you dismiss this entire movie because of either its reputation that you heard about or because of that last fight and how it might not work for you, you are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you ask me. There's so much that works in this movie.
And folks, that's a crime.
It is very bad. You can do a lot of prison time for that. And if you've ever done that,
you're going to be on Dateline. Like you're going to be everywhere, folks.
I would Google like where does that phrase come from, but I'm kind of scared of the answer I might get. Andrew.
Yeah, like I'm going to end up on some lists.
How to successfully? No, I there's so much that worked, and I get that I'm a big Stallone fan. I'm a big Rocky fan. I might be biased. I don't know, but Andrew, maybe back me up a little bit on something. What do you think about this?
Yeah,
movie and how it fits?
I was gonna say, as somebody that's decidedly less biased than you are, I like this. Going into this, I was kind of like, all right, let's I didn't need to like hype myself up, but I can't say I was like jazzed to watch this. But it's not like I got to the end and I was like, all right, that was like first off, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's like 100 minutes, so we're a good length. We're not trying to make this into some 2.5 hour epic, but the drama of Rocky is compelling and it's easy to kind of slide in and follow along without a whole lot of trouble. And I know you went through that big justification at the end for why he says "sue me for what," but as we know from later films, like it's essentially correct. Like he stays in Philly after this. He never moves beyond it. He ends up doing decently for himself, opens the restaurant and things like that, and continues onward. But I think it was really, it's an important step, like you said, because like if you go from like Rocky IV straight to Rocky Balboa, you are going to miss things, just even from a base story perspective. Like he has to get back to Philly and lose all the money somehow. And yeah, maybe it's a little contrived, but it's hardly the most contrived thing in this entire series. And I remember I used to view it, people used to kind of say that Rocky 1 to 5 is still the story. And then Rocky Balboa is like the PS. Because this movie kind of does button up Rocky as a character. Like you said, that last line, is kind of Rocky to a T. And then Rocky Balboa is kind of that epilogue, that PS to the character of just like, maybe there's one last thing to say with Rocky. And I think Rocky Balboa, we're not talking about that here, but I think it does that perfectly. And then obviously the Creed movies since then have shown that the character still has a place even now. And I think that's, like you said, this is a character that's been in film now for, we're getting close to 50 years, which is it's insane. That's a ridiculous amount of time to be playing one character. And it's definitely a character that has stood the test of time. And I think this movie definitely is an important piece of the story. Like you said, we're not going to pretend that there's not flaws here. We're not going to pretend there's not faults. But I think especially if you love the character, I think you're not going to have a problem watching this movie. There's plenty to enjoy. You've got great drama. You've got great emotion. The boxing, maybe not a whole lot of it. You get some montages and some training and stuff, but like obviously there's not a whole lot of one-on-one fights that you get the really kind of compelling drama for, like you do in the first 4 installments. Not necessarily a bad thing though. Like I said, at that point, Rocky punched communism to a knockout. So like, who is he going to fight now that's going to be able to create that kind of tension, folks? Nobody. That's who. But yeah, I think it's definitely enjoyable. I think if you love the character, especially, there are definitely things here to take in and enjoy. And like I said, if it's been a long time since you've watched it and you've kind of internally told yourself, hey, it's the bad one, it's the one with the street fight that's kind of dumb, give it a chance. I think you might be surprised.
Andrew, this has been a lot of fun. This podcast that we do, but I'm enjoying our new era, if you will, mixing up a little bit with the types of movies that we're looking at, different genres of movies. I mean, variety is a spice of life, as they say. So, fun to mix it up a little bit, Andrew.
It has lots of movies that maybe deserve a second chance out there beyond the superhero genre. So I'm excited for us and our listeners to dive into that.
There's one last Tuesday in June, which means one last Black Sheep movie we're going to be talking about. Next week, we'll be talking A Good Day to Die Hard, which is the 5th Die Hard movie. And I've only seen Die Hard 1 personally at the time of this recording. But again, kind of like Rocky 5, I know the reception of this one. I know this one is like, when everybody said, okay, maybe this franchise is done.
Yep. Well, I'm looking forward to that one though. I'm an apologist for most of the diehards. 5. I'm interested to go back and see if what my brain has in it is wrong, or if we're gonna have to work at it.
I'm excited for that too. And that brings us to question of the week, a very appropriate question, I think. This is coming from our Discord. If you're not in there already, what are you waiting for? Jump in. There's a link in the show notes. This week, the question is coming from Beavis, who asks, what's your criteria for choosing movies to review? Are there some that didn't make the cut? Why for? Great question. I think we got to start by saying we have a very scientific method of putting movies on a Google Sheets document that we share. I mean, that's the beginning of that, right?
Right. So when the first concept of the podcast was being formed, the first thing we did was basically just put together a list of every single quote unquote poorly received comic book movie we could think of. We did try to go outside the box, some stuff that, maybe we personally didn't really like the first time, things that maybe have a positive reception, but the fan reception was bad. It was really just trying to build out the most exhaustive list possible of all the films we could think of that fit kind of just that notion of maybe deserved a second chance. And that original list was, I mean, we did 59 episodes, and there's still probably a good 20 movies on that list that we didn't do, or that we didn't quite get around to, or just didn't quite think was gonna, whatever reason have you. So really, it was getting that list together and then just trying to whittle it down from there.
Yeah, that's basically it. And not really different now since we changed the format a little bit and it's not just comic book movies. So now we've just really opened it up to any poorly received movie, and then we'll find sort of a link between a handful of them to pit a month together. And that's what we're doing on our little spreadsheet now. As far as what does it mean to be poorly received, there's three things that I look at, sort of three pillars of the poorly received film, if you will. So you've got the box office. That's just very black and white. Did it make money? Did it make a profit? Or was it poorly received in that regard? You've got the critical reception, which Rotten Tomatoes is just a quick kind of shorthand for that. What percentage of critics liked the movie or would recommend the movie? And then the third one's a bit more ambiguous. It is, how was it received sort of by the public and pop culture? What's the
legacy of the film.
Legacy of the movie. Yeah. So Rocky V, great example. I mean, you just know by osmosis, just in pop culture, it is the low point of the franchise. It's poorly received in that regard. Sometimes a movie makes a lot of money, even has good reviews, but it's just not received by the public. And so it can be poorly received in that way. So the ideal movie for our show is going to hit 2 out of 3 of those. Or all 3 in some cases. But if we
definitely had some that hit all 3.
It does happen. But if we can get 2 of them, it's a pretty strong contender for our show. If it's just one of them, then it's a little bit more hit or miss. We'll do it sometimes, but that's what we're looking for. As far as movies that don't make the cut, not really. I mean, I think we're willing to do just about anything. It's only a matter of time. As long as this podcast continues, we're gonna get to everything. If there's something specific that you think fits that criteria that you would like to hear in the show, by all means, let us know. You can do so in the Discord that I've already mentioned. You can shoot us an email, besttherestpod@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter @BOTRcast, whatever's most convenient for you. Throw that movie our way. We'll work it into the schedule, and you'll have an episode soon. But until then, just remember that maybe not all movies are great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram @NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media @BOTRcast. Thank you. You recording locally? Levels are good?
I am indeed. Yeah, looks
right.
good. Looks good.
Let's count it up. 1.
Sorry. Start that over.
I forgot what comes next. Hang on. All right. Let's try counting again.
Dude, I just have to stop you. I just read a thing that Bryan Danielson might be also injured. Jesus Christ.
Well, now I'm in a bad mood, Andrew. Hang on.
This is terrible.